It is Thursday the 27th of February, the second to last day of Feb. That is momentous. To celebrate, here's a video about one of my favourite chapters in all of the Harry Potter books, The Other Minister. It is chapter 1 of the Half-Blood Prince book. Like I say, it's one of my favourite chapters in these books, and it's also yet another part of the story that was completely axed from the films. Hopefully HBO will do better. Now, it's the only time that we are properly introduced to the Muggle Prime Minister. You might be thinking, who cares about the Muggle Prime Minister? How boring. In a story about witches and wizards, who actually wants to hear about Keir Starmer? Well, it wouldn't have been Keir Starmer actually. Since the bulk of Harry Potter's story in the books is set between 1991 and 1997, that pretty much firmly puts us in John Major territory. Oof, not really the best character to include in a fantasy novel. He wasn't really known for being the most exciting or charismatic of Prime Ministers. Now, it's never actually mentioned in the book that it was John Major, by the way, but I'm using my excellent skills of deduction to work it out. Right, anyway, so back to the story. Let's soar back to 1990, an important year because it's actually the year that both Fudge and Mr. John Major came into power. So, in the Half-Blood Prince book, we learn that shortly after the Muggle Prime Minister came to power, he was visited by Cornelius Fudge in his office in Downing Street. He obviously didn't know about witches and wizards, so presumably he was a little bit shocked by Fudge emerging out of his fireplace. Fudge explains to the Prime Minister all about the secret wizarding community and that he'll only appear if something really important has happened in the wizarding world that might impact the Muggle community. Aside from that, Fudge says they'll probably never see each other. Bloody hell, can you imagine finding out about magic and witches and wizards after you've just become Prime Minister? I think the Muggle Prime Minister was a little bit shook when he found out, to be honest, but I think I would be absolutely buzzing. I would go and write a book about it straight away and sell millions of copies and become really rich. Oh wait, I think somebody already did that. Never mind. Anyway, so Fudge leaves the Muggle Prime Minister to it and doesn't see him again until 3 years later in 1993. Fudge appears out of the fire dripping wet to tell him that he's just got back from Azkaban and has found out that Sirius Black has escaped, which he has now gone to tell the Muggle Prime Minister. I'm not sure why he was so wet though. Did he swim to Azkaban or something? Anyway, so Fudge tells the Muggle Prime Minister that Sirius Black has escaped and that he's a threat to Muggles as well. Now, this must be so annoying for the Muggle Prime Minister. Being told that there's a dangerous wizard on the run who is a danger to Muggles, but that he literally can't tell anyone that he's a wizard. So, Fudge tells the Prime Minister to put a warning on the Muggle news about Sirius Black, which we obviously hear about at the start of the Prisoner of Azkaban book. He then appears again in 1994, which is during the Goblet of Fire book, to tell the Muggle Prime Minister that they're importing some dragons into the country for the Triwizard Tournament, but that he doesn't need to worry because they're handling it. But like, why even tell him? What's the Muggle Prime Minister actually supposed to do with this information? Like, I think if I were him, I'd rather just not know, to be honest. Fudge appears again in 1996 to tell him that there's been a mass breakout from Azkaban, which is Bellatrix Lestrange and 9 other Death Eaters escaping during the Order of the Phoenix. I think by this point the Muggle Prime Minister is freaking out, and you can't really blame him, to be honest. So when Fudge turns up again in the same year, just a few months later, to tell him that Voldemort is back and that they're basically now in war, and that Fudge has also been sacked, I don't think the Muggle Prime Minister was too pleased, to be fair. At this point, he was all stressed out because a load of bad stuff has been happening in the Muggle community as well. Which is actually because of what's been going on in the wizarding community, except the Prime Minister didn't know that. Due to Voldemort and the Death Eaters running riot, a bridge has collapsed which killed a bunch of Muggles. There were 2 really well publicised murders, a freak hurricane in the West Country, and one of the ministers in the Muggle Prime Minister's cabinet had been acting like a weirdo because he'd been placed under the Imperius curse by the Death Eaters. There was also a bunch of fog in the streets of London, which was due to the Dementors that had deserted Azkaban and joined Voldemort. The Muggles obviously couldn't see the Dementors, but Fudge tells the Muggle Prime Minister that all these things are basically happening because of the things that are going down in the magical community. So Fudge tells him all of this and introduces him to his replacement, who is Rufus Scrimgeour. The Muggle Prime Minister is not happy. He's basically been getting a load of flack for all the stuff that's been going on from his opposition and in the Muggle news, and now he finds out that it's all happening because of stuff that's happening with the witches and wizards that he's not allowed to tell anyone in the Muggle community about. How annoying would that be? To be fair, can you imagine if he stood up in front of BBC News and said, "Listen, yeah, everything that's been going wrong, all these people that are dying in the fog in the streets, it's not my fault, it's because of a hidden community of witches and wizards." He would sound completely mental, to be fair, and probably be carted off to a mental hospital. I'm guessing he wasn't able to shake off the political troubles that he was facing though, because only a year later, in 1997, John Major lost the general election to Tony Blair. Anyway, so that's the last we hear about the Muggle Prime Minister. We know that whilst Rufus Scrimgeour is Minister for Magic, Cornelius Fudge agrees to be an advisor and plays the middleman between Rufus Scrimgeour and the Muggle Prime Minister. But presumably when Scrimgeour is killed by the Death Eaters in 1997 and Voldemort essentially takes over the ministry, the relationship between the Muggle Prime Minister and the Minister for Magic probably wasn't too good. When Voldemort is killed though in 1998, Kingsley Shacklebolt takes over as Minister of Magic. I'm sure that Shacklebolt and Tony Blair would have had a long and thriving relationship. I wonder what Kingsley Shacklebolt thought about the Iraq War. This does get me thinking though. Before Voldemort dies, during the war against Voldemort and the Death Eaters, why didn't the Muggles help? We're obviously sort of led to believe that wizards and witches are way too powerful to be handled by Muggles. But why didn't Fudge or Scrimgeour just ask for some help? How well would Voldemort and the Death Eaters been able to defend themselves against nuclear weapons? However, having said that, it might have been kind of difficult for the Muggle Prime Minister to justify this to his government. We need to use our weapons against some invisible enemies that you've got no evidence even exist. Anyway, so that's that. I just love getting this insight into the Muggle world and seeing the interaction between the Muggle Prime Minister and Fudge. I can see why they left out the films in fairness, because it might have been kind of time consuming and it's not really too much of an important part of the story, but with plenty of time in the HBO series, I'm hoping that we can see it all. I think it would be really cool if they had the Muggle Prime Minister as like a recurring character that appears in every season, where we get to see little short interactions between the Muggle Prime Minister and Fudge every year. Anyway, so that's that. If you enjoyed this video, drop it a like and subscribe to the channel for more.